I'll try to, it's the first time I've sung, as you could probably tell. So I will scratch you through this. In his beautiful book, I Shall Not Want, Robert Ketchum tells of a Sunday school teacher who asked her group of children if anyone could quote the entire 23rd Psalm. You know, the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. A golden-haired 4.5-year-old girl was among those who raised their hands. Well, a bit skeptical, the teacher asked if she could really quote the entire psalm. Well, the little girl came to the front of the room. She faced the class, made a perky little bow, and said, "The Lord is my shepherd, that's all I want." She bowed again and went and sat down. That may well be the greatest interpretation of the 23rd Psalm I've ever heard. We are still in the book of Mark. We tackled the first half of chapter 5 last week because it was a big story, and there was a lot going on within that story, and instead of breaking it down and looking at its different parts, we saw 3 huge sections going on, 3 huge points going on, where Jesus was just giving a perfect example of his mercy and of his grace. No matter what your past may be, no matter who you were before, it's who you are standing in front of you now and where your heart is. And we saw this example last week. Well, today isn't a lot different because we have another large story with 2 things going on in the middle of it. So I'm going to read Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43. If you were trying to pull this up digitally, I actually read from the ESV, the English Standard Version. In the seats, we have the Holman Christian, but I read from the ESV. And I'm going to be reading Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43, and then we're going to go back and look at what's going on here. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." And he went with them. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed in your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was, taking her by the hand, and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Now here we have a large narrative, a lot going on here. But really there's 2 stories going on within this that sort of intertwine each other and sort of parallel each other. It's the same type of grace being shown at different levels. You have a lady that's on a lower status, a much lower status, and then a ruler of the synagogue that's on a higher status. And they sort of meet in the middle, where Jesus, they come to meet Jesus where at Jesus' point, where he's at, no matter the status. So we're going to look at how these work and what's going on here. So first, I'm actually going to do this a little different. I'm going to start with the story of the woman, because the rest of it sort of works around this story. So I'm going to start with the story of the woman, and we're going to look at verses 25 through 34 first. So first, verse 25. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. Now, upon initially reading this, you're thinking, oh my goodness, especially you ladies are probably thinking, oh my goodness. Okay. But there's more than just a physical problem. I want to set the picture of how her every day may look like. So I'm going to stop right now, and I'm going to go back to Leviticus chapter 15. Is what I'm going to go. So I'm going to read you 3 verses. You can go with me if you want to. You don't have to. But it's Leviticus chapter 15. And I'm going to read to you verses 25 through 27. And remember, this law that's set in place, this Mosaic law, is still in place at this point in time. So Leviticus 15, 25 through 27. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, not at the same time of her menstrual impurity, or if she has a discharge beyond the time of her impurity, all the days of the discharge she shall continue in uncleanness. As in the days of her impurity, she shall be unclean. Every bed on which she lies, all the days of her discharge, shall be to her as the bed of her impurity. And everything on which she sits shall be unclean, as in the uncleanness of her menstrual impurity. And whoever touches these things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. She can't do anything. She is considered unclean, which is separated. Even what she touches is considered unclean. Now, this isn't an issue she's dealing with for a couple of days, guys. This is 12 years, every single day. This woman she's ostracized from the community, from everyone else. Rightfully so, by law. And she's dealing with this constantly. She's at her wit's end. She is desperate. She has done everything she can to get this taken care of because her life is really, there isn't much life there. I'm going to give you a little picture here. This is a chronic menstrual disorder. It's a perpetual issue of blood. Such a condition would be difficult for any woman of any era, especially for 12 years. But for this woman, nothing could be worse. No part of her life was left unaffected. Sexually, she couldn't be touched by her husband. She couldn't be touched. Maternally, she could not bear children. Domestically, anything she touched was considered unclean. No washing dishes, no sweeping floors, no touching anything. Spiritually, she was not allowed to enter the temple. She was physically exhausted and socially ostracized. She awoke daily in a body that no one wanted. She's down to her last prayer, and on this day she's about to pray it. You also have to remember, too, no one can touch anything that she's touched. She has to announce before you come to her, I'm unclean. Be careful. Just like the lepers that were pushed outside of the city gates of town, that were to stay out there, and if you come near them, they had to yell, unclean. You can't come near me. This was this woman's life every single day for 12 years. So she's in a desperate position, a desperation. And as I read these, one thing I want you to do, 2 things I want you to do, especially just reading through it. There's a lot more to in-depth study, but first I want you to put yourself in the mind of the author or the person in the story. I want you to see what they see. You got to be in that time. You have to remember, when these authors wrote, they didn't have you in mind. So they weren't writing to you today, even though you may want to think that. They were writing to a particular audience. So they had socially, culturally, and contextually these people in mind when they were writing. So you've really got to see that to truly understand the meaning. And of course the meaning transcends to us, but you got to see that. And I don't remember the second thing I was going to say, but there you go. I want you to see that whenever you are reading. You've got to really get into the mindset of the author and the person that's in the story. So she's in a desperation mode. She's done everything that she can. Verse 26. Now this lady, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. So this is an explanation of her desperation. She had exhausted every means available to her to get this fixed. Everything she had, she put towards it. Another thing that's pretty neat, this same story in Luke is sort of important to understand because Luke was a physician. So when he tells this story, you would have thought that he would have taken the moment to say, let me explain why it didn't work. Let's kind of take the sides of the physician because they're doing their best, right? But he doesn't. He sarcastically says, and yes, there is sarcasm in Scripture, which is an awesome thing, by the way. He sarcastically says, they couldn't do anything to help her. Nothing. Mark makes it clear she even grew worse. But Luke says, straightforward, no one could do anything, which left the door open for only one person that could help, and that was Christ. He was very clear about it. And I'm actually going to revert to Luke 3 times during this. There was a piece in the Morning Edition in 1988. It tells a story that in 1958, America's first commercial jet air service began with the flight of the Boeing 707. A month after that first flight, a traveler on a piston engine, a small propeller plane, airliner, struck up a conversation with a fellow passenger. The passenger happened to be a Boeing engineer. The traveler asked the engineer about the new jet aircraft, whereupon the engineer began speaking at length about the extensive testing Boeing had done on the jet engine before bringing it into commercial service. He recounted Boeing's experience with engines from the B-17 to the B-52, a lot of information. When his traveling companion asked him if he himself had yet flown on the 707, the new airliner, the engineer replied, I think I'll wait until it's been in service a while. Even enthusiastic talking about our faith doesn't mean much if we're not willing to put our lives where our mouth is. This woman is in desperation mode. She is at the end of her rope. We can relate to this. Everyone sitting in here has had a point in their life where they felt somewhat desperate. They didn't know what to do. They were at their wits' end. Now, everyone to a different degree than others, I'm sure. But I would venture to say that everyone sitting in here at a point in your life has been like, I don't know what else to do. I have exhausted everything to this point. So where's the only place to turn to? What's the only place we should have turned to start with? But we've all been at this point. And that's where this lady's at. Every day she gets up, she just can't do anything. She's not around anyone. She can't touch anything. And if she does, she has to make sure that she lets everyone know that if she comes near the vicinity of anyone, she can't go into a crowd, which is why this is so crucial that we see this, because whoever she touches, she has made them unclean. She's not only making her way through a crowd, in desperation mode, she's going to the only thing she thinks that will work at this point. Verses 27 through 28. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. Now, every time I've ever read this story, I've always imagined this woman in desperation crawling on her hands and her knees and making her way through the legs of these people. And as Jesus goes by, she just reaches out and all she can get a hold of is his garment. That's really dramatic and it sounds neat, but that's actually not what's going on here. Again, going back to Luke 8:44, the recount of this story, it says she touched the fringe of his garment. So what's the fringe? If you think of a Jewish person has like a prayer towel now, they have these tassels that hang on, these strings that hang. And it was, by law, the Jewish leaders, rabbis, and a lot of the people had to have these tassels hanging from the fringe of their garments. It was a common tradition, a thought process of that time, that the true Messiah, when he came, that even the fringe of his garments would have healing power. So this was an intentional, deliberate touching of the fringe of his garments. And the fact that she deliberately, intentionally reaches for the fringe of his garments tells you what? What did she think? That he's the Messiah. This is the real deal. I truly know this is going to heal me. I've exhausted everything else. I have done everything the world has told me to do, exhausted every option that's out there to me physically in this world. Now the only thing left that can heal me is Christ alone. This is an awesome thing. She knew that if she touches, she's going to be healed. Well, let's see what happens. Verses 29 and 30. And immediately, the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" This woman knew that she has just deliberately disregarded the law because she went through this crowd and touched people. She had to get near him. The crowd was just pressing on Christ. Everywhere he went, they were here. Everywhere. So to get close to him, she had to touch people. She knew that she had just done that. She was desperate because she knew Christ was the only way to be saved. Now, she's hoping, I just want to touch his garments and turn around and go home healed. I hope he doesn't see that this has just happened and calls me out in front of everyone, right? Goodness gracious, because I've disregarded the law. Well, uh-oh. Christ turns and says, "Who touched me?" Reading on, 31 through 34. And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" I think that's pretty. Are you kidding me? You want me to tell you who touched you? Look at all these people. And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Now, we see fear and trembling. Yes, this means two things here. I imagine she's somewhat scared because she knows that she's being called out in front of people. She's disregarded the law. She has touched people, which has, by law, rendered them unclean. She's touched Christ, which, by law, should have rendered him unclean. But also fear and trembling here, the way that the Greek words are used, also means a feeling of awe, a feeling of reverence. And one thing to not miss here is the fact that you have the Holy Messiah standing there. And whenever she touches his garments, when he is touched, he's not rendered unclean, but instead a reversal happens. And she's made clean. Because he cannot be made unclean. This is a real neat thing to see. Everyone else that she touched immediately would have been made unclean, but as soon as God himself, it comes near him, the reversal happens. And he heals her. Immediately, it says. Then not only that, he turns and says, "Daughter." So what's he saying by saying that? The fact that Jesus calls her daughter indicates that he considers her part of his family now. And to say that her faith has made her well indicates a physical and a spiritual healing. Because he just said, "Daughter, and you're made well." It's amazing. So now let's get back to the rest of the story. What's going on around this? What else is going on in the midst of this amazing miracle that's happened just by touching the Messiah's fringe of his garments? So now I'm going to go back to the beginning of this section and tie this all together. So I'm reading verses 21 through 24 here, so I'm going back a little. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him. And then this is where the woman interjected. So, who is Jairus? We just saw this woman that for 12 years has been ostracized completely from everything. Now we have a ruler of the synagogue. He's an instructor, which means he's an important person of high status within the community. And Jesus' fame has grown to the point that in desperation, now you got to remember, he says, "My daughter is at the point of death," which means he's been dealing with this for a while. Now in desperation, everything else has been exhausted. He's at the point of saying, "I know if I go to him, because I've heard about him, this is going to work." And he falls at his feet. To put it in today's thought process, the only thing I can think of, this is like saying a professor with so many letters after his name has went to the local street corner preacher and fell down at his feet and said, "I know you're the only way this is going to work." Because he's a real high status within the community. He's a wealthy man and a well-known man. I want you to picture this too. This is what I thought of as I was reading this. I want you to picture you have your child. your daughter or your son, we'll say your daughter because that's what's used in the story. Your daughter has been diagnosed with cancer. Now, it's initially early on. So, okay, well, of course, it's devastating to hear this at first, but you start going through the processes. They're saying you can beat this. So you go through this long process. You're praying, you're reaching out, you're going to where you need to go, you're getting the treatments, you're doing all that you can. And for months, you're dealt with this. And now it's to the point to where they say, there's nothing else we can do. So you're in a desperate mode. You're exhausted. You're at your final prayer, the final thing you can do. Now imagine you pick up your daughter because she's near the point of death and you know that time is of the essence. And you run into a hospital. You've seen on the movies where they run in and they're carrying and they're yelling, we need help now, and the nurses come running. Well, this doctor, because you've heard that this doctor, this one doctor, can save your daughter. So the doctor comes out and the doctor says, yes, I can. Time is of the essence. Follow me. So he turns. And you know that there's only moments left, but in the middle of it, he stops because somebody with the flu has come up to him. And you're thinking, are you kidding me? So he stops and he deals with this person with the flu and he's like, okay, I'm going to help you. And he helps him. Well, while you're waiting, your daughter has died in your arms. Well, I'm going to stop there because we can all guess what our reaction would be at that point. Are you kidding me? Well, let's see what happens here whenever the same type of story, the same thing has happened with Jairus. Skipping forward to verse 35, after the encounter with this woman, while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? So Jairus has just witnessed, in the middle of stopping, he says, my daughter is at the point of death. You're my final hope. He stops and takes care of this woman and talks to her. Actually, he didn't even have to stop. She touched his garment. He could have kept going. No, he stops and has a chit-chat with her, right? And he just hears the Messiah say, daughter, you're made well. Then turns right around and he hears, Jairus, your daughter has just died. Verse 36, but overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. Jesus hears it immediately. He says, what's the antidote for fear? Faith. Always. Just like in the storm. He says, don't be afraid, have faith. And he tells Jairus, don't fear, believe. Okay. Jairus keeps his mouth shut. He's like, you know what, I came to you in desperation, and I know you can take care of this. Verses 37 through 40. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child's not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside, took the child's father and mother, and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. You got to understand, it's easy to read this and think, are they somewhat crazy with grief? They start laughing. In this point in time in the ancient world, they had professional mourners. Here's what they had. What their vocation was, if you wanted to call that, they would be paid to weep and wail and mourn outside of a funeral or procession. If someone was deathly sick, that's what they were paid to do. So and the richer you were, the more well off you were, the more you could have. And that's what's going on here. You've got these professional mourners that are weeping and wailing and carrying on and having this big commotion. So when Jesus is like, what are you doing? She's sleeping. Well, that's why. There's not an attachment there. So they start laughing at him. They're like, this guy's crazy. So that's what this is. It's not like the family just is disconnected at this point. We see here in verses 41 and 42, Jesus takes her by the hand and he says to her, Talitha Kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. He takes her by the hand, which is another thing that would have rendered him unclean. You can't touch the dead, it renders you unclean. So what does Christ do? Almighty, perfect God, Messiah, touches her and is reversed. And she's brought back to life. Not only brought back to life, but perfectly healed. We see also, when we revert back to this story in Luke, in chapter 8, verse 55, it says that her spirit returned, which means she was dead. She wasn't simply sleeping in the way we think of sleeping. She's dead. When he says get up, she gets up. And not only that, she's hungry. I even resorted to the Synoptic Gospels and looked at this, and each one they say she wanted to eat. I do not know why. Can't even guess why. Guess you're hungry if you're dead and you come back. I imagine it's somewhat a hard thing to deal with. But then we see in verse 43, and he strictly charged them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. No one should know this. Now, could you do that? We're commanded a lot of things, but could you keep that to yourself, really? So, this girl has died in your arms. Your daughter has died in your arms. And the doctor turns around and says, don't worry about it. Come on. I've got this. And it's taken care of. So then later on, you've dealt with this for months. Just the day before, she's on her deathbed, and you're desperate, and you've got friends and relatives that know this and have seen this. Now, a couple days later, fully healthy, you're sitting at McDonald's eating somewhere. And they come up and go, what's going on here? We just saw her. Are you going to keep it to yourself? I'm not. I'm sorry to say, I'm going to share exactly what happened and say this is an amazing thing and proclaim his glory and his mercy, just like he told the demon-possessed guy to do that we looked at last week. So, your pastor ventures to say he probably wouldn't have followed this command. I would have probably told a lot of people, as I imagine you guys would too. So what we see here is both of these stories are amazing examples of stepping out in faith. They're at their wits' end. They're in desperation mode. They've exhausted every possible means available to them. And they hear of the Messiah. They know of his fame. They know who he claims to be and what he's done so far. Signs and miracles accompanied his teaching. And they were willing to go that route. They were in desperation mode, but they had faith. I know, he says, if you come to her, she will be made well. I know, the woman says to herself, if I only touch the fringe of his garments, I will be made well. They know this. So they step out in faith. Stepping out in faith isn't easy. The results may not be what we expect. Jairus went to get help for a sick daughter, and things actually got worse at first. His daughter died. Other times the results will turn out even better than we had hoped. The woman was instantly healed. Jairus' daughter was brought back to life and healed. And then at other times there's mixed results. The woman was publicly recognized as scared, which she dreaded. But then she was affirmed, which transformed her. So, we need to assess our lives and our walk with God. We need to take him, make him the focus of everything, including our problems. We say the words, we need to have a God-centered life. What's that look like? What's it look like? Now I wished I would have brought a prop. I would have shown you this. I've seen this, and I'll explain it to you since I didn't think this through. But I've seen someone take a small glass and they poured it about half full of rice, dried rice. And then they put a tennis ball on top of it. The tennis ball's sticking out about that far. So if you have all your issues, your world, your life, your problems, your good, everything first, then you try to fit God into that, it just doesn't fit. But then you pour everything out, put the tennis ball in first, and you can pour the rice all in around it. That would have been a great prop. I should have thought that through. But God-centered means he's first. You don't plan everything out and say, God, I am going to go do this now. I need you to bless me in doing this. You know what? He may say, okay, because that's not what you need. I'm going to give it to you. And then it's going to be worse in the long run. God-centered life means you go to him first. Say, Lord, this is what's on my plate. This looks like the door that's open. It looks like the right thing to do. Help me with this decision. Throw it at his feet, come to him first, and then see if that door stays open, if he leads you in that way. And I promise you, it's not that hard to see. If you turn to him and focus on him first, it happens. I want you to look around right now. And this is going to be an easy one. I'm going to make it easy. Find something that's blue. I know the seats, but other than the seats, find something that's blue. You've got Tim's shirt there. Okay, you got the sign, some of the things on the walls. So now at this moment, what color stands out to you most? Blue. It's like getting a car, a new car, or a new car to you. Once you get that car, you kind of see that make and model a little more, don't you? Like, I never really noticed how many of those were on the street. We talked about that. Of course, our new cars are 20 years old when we get them, but yeah, I mean, that's what we do. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. At times in our lives, God seems strangely absent. But the problem isn't that God has disappeared. We simply lack a God mindset. When we develop our sensitivity, we soon begin to see his work everywhere. When you live a God, Christ-centered life, you start to see his work everywhere. So on a little different note than what I normally do, I'm not going to leave you with something to take with you. I'm going to leave you with some questions to ask yourself. Some questions to apply as you go out there. And on the surface, they sound like, oh, good questions. No, apply them. See what they look like in action. I want you to ask yourself, in what ways are you demonstrating your faith? That's different than just saying, I've got faith. Ask yourself, what steps can I take to strengthen my faith? And then finally, in what areas of my life can I practice believing? These are action words, not just knowledge words. They're action words. Because faith is faith in action. Heavenly Father, we thank you again, once again, for allowing us to gather together and dive into your word. You give us these stories of how you walked amongst those that weren't supposed to even be touched or be around. And through your holy presence, your magnificence, you reverse this uncleanness, which is a perfect example of the beginning of your kingdom, the kingdom of God, which is a reversal of the fallen world creation that we have destroyed. Coming to you will reverse our unclean spirit, will reverse this horrible nature that we are born with. When you come into us, you transform us. You make us a new creation, you said. And then there's that process of sanctification where we are made perfect through the reversal that you have given us. And you say, all come to me. Higher the status, the lower the status, it doesn't matter. All. I'm here for all, for the world. So everyone sitting here, everyone that watches this, everyone that reads your word knows that they don't have to be at a certain point in their life to have you meet them and change them. That you are here for all sinners, no matter who they are and how they're looked at. Lord, I ask that you will transform us in ways that we could never imagine. Go with us as we go out of those doors. That this word and this transformation can go with us. And I ask these things in your precious name. Amen.